back to Local Decision. I'm Rusty Ray, and we're joined today by a candidate for Blaine City Council in Ward 3. It's Chris Massoglia. Chris, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Rusty. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you were here a couple months ago for our primary interviews, and so since then, what have you been up to? What has changed? Obviously, a victory or moving on through the primary, I should say, but since then, what have you been up to with this?
Yeah, well, I'm grateful to be here. I just want to thank everybody watching that voted for me in the primary. I really appreciate it. Thanks to you guys for, pushing out this information about local candidacy, because I think it's really important. I've just been getting out and talking to people. I've hit every neighborhood in our ward here. There's Ward 3 is pretty big. It goes all the way from University past Lexington over to Sunset. So it's a pretty big area, and a lot of different types of housing. We've got the manufactured housing. We have brand new developments, houses that have been there since the 70s, 80s. So just kind of trying to get out and talk to everybody and get a feel for where all the residents are at. And it's been really fun. It's been really fun to meet people and just hear what issues are important to them.
In those areas, you talk about redevelopment along the western end of that, right? In old properties or reimagining, or maybe even new tenants coming into old buildings, especially with businesses, especially along places like University. But then when you get over the eastern side, obviously it's all new development.
Yeah.
Different concerns, shared concerns, or are people kind of generally interested in the same things when you talk to them, or are they specific concerns that you're trying to keep in mind?
I mean, I think there's some neighborhood-specific concerns, but I mean, you'd be surprised. Everybody wants low property tax, clean water, safety, security. I mean, I think the basic desires of all residents are pretty universal. Everybody wants to have Blaine be a safe place to live. Everybody wants Blaine to be affordable. And so those are kind of the two things that I'm focusing on, and I've really seen that really resonate with residents. There are a few specific neighborhood issues that have come up, but overall, like I said, people just want to keep Blaine affordable and keep Blaine safe.
We talked last time about your talk and your push for talking about public safety. Certainly in this year and in the climate of where we are with things, that's been a big topic of discussion. But you shared with me that you had been talking about that kind of before all of this started with George Floyd and everything like that. And you just mentioned it a moment ago. People really want to see a safe place to live and to grow their families and things like that. I come back to this, and we talked about it a little bit last time, but I come back to it because I think it's on people's minds. You want to provide those services. You want to provide more officers if you can on the streets and more visibility. How do you pay for it, though, especially with a budget shortfall probably coming up because of COVID, and then maybe even continuing on into further years? How do you pay for it? You talked about exploring the way the city is spending money on other things already.
Correct, yeah. I think that there's a lot of things that we need to look at in the city budget. We're running a deficit on our refuse fund. Our garbage contract with Walters, it's like, why are we losing $30,000 this year on that contract? Or not the contract, but the fund is losing $30,000. The sewer fund, we're operating at $1 million loss. The storm drainage utilities fund, the facilities maintenance fund. I mean, there's all these funds that, we're not bringing in enough to sustain the fund. We're spending more than we're bringing in. And, when you look at the increase in the tax base here in Blaine, the tax base has gone up 17% every year the past 3-4 years. And so, I think we need to ask some of those questions, like why are we, struggling to pay for some of these things when we've had a 17% increase in the tax base every year the past 3-4 years? I mean, think about your own personal finances. If you had a 17% increase, I mean, that would be pretty sweet, right? And so, obviously there's cost to all these things, but I think that there's a lot of areas that we can look at, where we can just be spending the money better, more wisely. I do want to take a look at some of the incentives that we're giving out. I think Blaine has developed a lot. I think in some ways we've overdeveloped. I mentioned last time wanting to look at the tax increment financing budget, and you mentioned some of the housing over on University and all that. My view is that Blaine does not need to be giving out tax incentive dollars for housing, apartments, or townhomes here in Blaine. We just don't need to be doing that. I think that we need to keep our incentives and money from the Economic Development Authority and all that kind of stuff, we need to make sure that that money is only spent on business and retail and things that are going to really be increasing the tax base without putting a huge strain on the city to cover for all the residential needs. And I think that will help the city prioritize the current residential needs as far as safety, clean water, new roads, all that kind of stuff that we all want to see here in Blaine. So I think that just really going in and asking some of those tough questions is something that I'm going to do, and I think that I'm going to be a candidate who isn't afraid to ask some of those tough questions, even if I get a little pushback. I think asking the question starts the conversation, and then hopefully we can all find a solution. So.
Yeah, Blaine has to fit into kind of the landscape that, like the Met Council and affordable housing is a big topic, and especially the closer in inner ring suburbs. But it's going to start becoming more of an issue, I think, in places like Blaine, or the big economic development push from the county and all the partnerships that Anoka County and that office is pushing forward. Blaine is a part of that, wants to be a part of that, but you just think, let's take a look at how we're spending some of that money and those incentives. In some cases, communities have to offer those incentives to have bigger companies come in here, and then the tax base, and then maybe the people follow it in some regard. So there's that balance. That seems like it would be a tough thing to try to conceptualize and try to balance.
Yeah, definitely, and you're exactly right. I want to keep the incentives for industry and retail. As far as affordable housing goes, I feel like Blaine, has a lot of different variety in housing. We do have some affordable apartments. We have great manufactured housing parks available. So I think that we already do have a lot of affordable housing options. If my opponent or anybody else on the council wants to bring in like Section 8 or something, that's totally up to them, but that's not something that I would be for. I think Blaine already has a lot of affordable housing options, and I think that we just need to look at the budget and keep the spending down, because that's how we keep property taxes low for everybody.
Thinking about all of these types of issues and in conversations and in like the League of Women Voters debate setting from last week, and that's something available for folks to watch on North Metro TV, but in those conversations also with voters face to face, is COVID dominating, or is COVID playing such a large part in those conversations? And is that maybe taking away from these issues or postponing at the very least these issues that the city has to confront?
As I've been out just engaging with the community, it hasn't been, a number one issue of concern. Thankfully, we have done a good job here in Blaine, social distancing and not going out when you're sick and all that kind of stuff. We haven't had any outbreaks here in Blaine, so that's phenomenal. So it hasn't been a top issue of concern when I've been out there talking to people. Again, keeping things affordable, keeping things safe, I think that's been kind of the thing that's been really resonating with people as I've been talking to them. And then also just, the issue of transparency, that's something that I bring up. And a lot of people, really agree with that. They're like, yeah, we really want to be communicated with more, when a new housing development is going in our neighborhood, or the city's talking about, cutting down tons of trees in Pioneer Park to put in a new wetland, and just the communication around that and the struggles that have been there. And so, that's something that people have really wanted as well. So I haven't seen COVID be like the topic of interest for most residents, at least in Ward 3.
Mm-hmm. And certainly there are things that people want more transparency about, but again, communication is one thing. Do you think transparency also means that people want to have a voice in that, or they just want to be able to more clearly know things that are happening? Or because the city sends out all kinds of, we produce communication for the city at North Metro TV through our partnership, so there is communication. Does that also mean being able to have a voice in that, you think?
Yeah, and nothing against you guys at all. I mean, I think there have been some communication issues. Like I went and talked to residents over, north of Main Street, up over by Pioneer Park, and there was just some miscommunications there with, they got a letter from, I think it was the Army Corps of Engineers, and I talked to somebody at the city about that, and she said that was kind of just an unfortunate communication thing. But I think communication is transparency, and I think that there is communication going out for sure, but it's actually, making sure that communication connects with the residents. And, I think that there's, a lot of different ideas that I personally have for increasing communication, whether it's, here at North Metro TV, getting that out, sharing things like you were saying.
Well, did you have something,
before,
any more specifics about that, or any ideas specifically?
Yeah, I think doing more stuff on YouTube, Instagram would be great. I mean, the city of Blaine, I think they have like an Instagram page. I think it gets like 7 or 8 likes for every communication. So I mean, thinking about how can we increase that and really produce communication that residents are engaging with, especially on things that people really care about, like the issue at Pioneer Park with the mainland or Main Street wetland bank and all that kind of stuff. How can we really be out there engaging with residents in a way that they feel like they totally understand what's going on and that they do have a voice, like you're saying. I mean, I think that's part B of the communication process.
The county has recently put in some efforts to kind of survey people about what they think about mass transit in Anoka County and the options. Now, Northtown Mall has a transit hub that's close by. It may be moving its location here, I believe. If it hasn't already, it will be soon. And we've reported on that. But are there more options for mass transit? And certainly that's a Met Council. They have to bring that from the cities out here.
Sure.
You've got the park and ride out here off of 35W, but are there more options that you think people in Blaine would utilize should they be available? And again, without COVID, all things being equal, everybody back at work like they want to be or supposed to be or whatever. Is there more options for mass transit that Blaine could look into?
The thing with transit that I think we need to focus on is everything with Highway 65. I think we need to make sure that we, get first things first. And I think, when I'm out there engaging with residents, that comes up all the time. And it's not an issue that I'm personally running on because I've lived in Blaine for 10 years and every politician that stopped by my doors, I'm going to fix Highway 65, and it's like, it's been 10 years now. And so, I mean, the Minnesota Department of Transportation just did a great study on some different options for Highway 65, but I think that really needs to be the city's priority when it comes to transportation and making sure that people can get to and from work safely and, time efficient. So I also think that we need to do a better job as a city preparing for road use and, with all the new housing that's gone up in Northeast Blaine, we need to start, making sure everything's, kind of squared away for Lexington Avenue there, because that's going to be super heavily trafficked as well. And if we don't, make great plans for that and start saving for capital improvement plans for Lexington, I think we're going to run into a similar issue as Highway 65. And again, that just goes back to a little bit of the development philosophy and some of the differences my opponent and I have in that. But I think that we need to kind of focus on first things first when it comes to transportation, and hopefully everybody at the city level will be working hard to fix Highway 65, because I think that is a #1 issue that is of concern to the residents here.
Do you think that Lexington Avenue corridor, what do you think that's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years? I mean, there is a lot of development. There are a lot of houses have gone up and will be going up, but there are some retail options out there as well. There's some big names that have floated around, but in 10 years, is that going to look dramatically different, and is a lot of activity in Blaine going to shift to that direction, you think?
I think it depends on who wins these elections. I think that's a big difference between my opponent and I. He really wants to keep the gas pedal down in terms of development. And, I want to adjust our development strategy a little bit here in Blaine. Like I said, I think we should only be giving incentives out to, retail and industry. I don't think we need to incentivize apartments, townhomes, or residential housing. Unlike my opponent, I also, am going to be pretty hesitant to switch zoning from single family to high density residential. I just think that puts a huge toll on our roads and water. We've seen a lot of water issues in the Northeast. I think we need a new fire station in the Northeast, kind of going back to, what I'm running on for safety. So I think that there's some things that, I'm looking at that would be a little different. Obviously, we really should try to get some retail opportunities along 35W there in Lexington. I mean, that's like the prime spot for business, because that's the major highway that we have going through Blaine. So I think we need to keep that reserved for industry, business, retail, and I'm sure my opponent would agree on me with that. But I think it really depends on this next round of elections. We're going to have a new mayor this year. We're going to have a new city council, and I think that this election is going to kind of shape the future of Blaine in some ways. And my view is that Blaine is a high demand area. You know, it's an area that people are going to want to be developing in, building houses in for years down the road, years to come. And so again, we don't need to, you know, just be going, you know, pedal to the metal and incentivizing tons of residential. We can let that happen organically over time, and we can really focus on the business and the retail that we all want to be coming into the city.
All right, we'll leave it on that. Chris
Awesome.
Massoglia, thank you very much for
Thanks,
being here.
Rusty. I really appreciate it.
You got it.
Thank you.